Hello and welcome to another episode of In Person. Today we will have a conversation with someone I'm sure you have seen a video of. Richard is a very great journalist. He has been really known since the rise of Assange case. He's an independent journalist since before the rise of the independent journalism. I know I have seen him talk about Syria, Yemen, Palestine. But at the beginning was like he was there in the court. He was reporting inside the court. We all know what happened to Julian Assange, but we also know that this has started a new era in journalism where we can also speak and say whatever we want, literally whatever we want on such platforms. And the new generation is really interacting with that. And this in turn is really like breaking the power of the mainstream media and the mainstream media's narrative. Before I talk too much, allow me to welcome you, Richard. I'm so glad to have this conversation with you today.
Hi, thank you for having me on the show. It's really great to be here.
Hi, would you mind if you could tell us a little bit about yourself for the Lebanese viewer or any new viewer who doesn't know who you are?
Well, I'm an independent journalist, as you pointed out, and I've been reporting on all of these issues because my life has been affected by international relations. Both my parents were in the United Nations in peacekeeping, and I wasn't alive, for example, when they were in Angola, but afterwards in Lebanon, in Syria.
You're British Syrian, right?
Exactly. Yeah. My mother is Syrian and my father is English. And so they actually met working in the United Nations. And yeah, and then so we moved around in Pakistan, Switzerland, and so on. And I just grew up in that environment where you're talking about politics at the dinner table every day because that's how it is. So yeah, that I sort of have a natural inclination towards it, and I want to do it independently because you cannot work as a journalist in England in one of the mainstream outlets and actually be a journalist, because there's always going to be someone looking over your shoulder telling you what to do and how to say it, and it's anything but impartial. It's completely biased. So and I know this two ways. I know this because of the language that they use. I'm able to deconstruct it that way. But I also know, I know this, having watched what happened to Julian Assange, as you mentioned, really just like an attack on journalism, without question.
Richard, I really am interested in discussing free journalism and the price that we pay and the freedom in return and the power. But before we start and we get there, let's start talking about Palestine today. The most recent new era of how the world is talking and screaming for Palestine, from Aaron Bushnell to London to Berlin to Norway to activists to Jewish Voice for Peace. I know you have been in the rallies in the UK, and you have also made speeches, as I recall. I've seen that on your social media. Would you tell us, where do you see what is happening today? Why are the Americans actually building a port in Gaza? Where do we stand today?
Yeah, that's right. I was speaking outside Downing Street about 2 weeks ago after the Assange thing, and I made sure to talk about Palestine as well, because we come back to the same actors at the end of the day. It's the Americans, and the same arms contractors, and this bridge, this port, this jetty that they want to build at Gaza. I mean, it's a joke. First of all, if you're going to deliver aid to someone, you're going to bring it over a land route when possible, because you can bring much larger quantities. But we have to remember that the Americans and the Israelis, they've had their eye on Gaza for a very, very long time because of its geostrategic location. And if you look at the last couple of decades, what has happened in the Middle East? Well, we see, for example, the Beirut port explosion took out Beirut's maritime trade. The Syrian port of Latakia bombed by the Israelis. And then, Gaza, of course, occupied by the Israelis. So really, the only actual functioning port on the Mediterranean Levantine coast that you have left is then Haifa, which is occupied by the Israelis. So, they've been wanting to control the maritime trade that way. And of course, at the same time with the war in Ukraine, people think that these are disconnected events, that they're not disconnected from one another. Because you've seen, I mean, if you look at who has the largest supplies of gas and how you need to get that to the European Union, obviously Russia is the first choice, but now Russia's out of the game. They've been sanctioned and Nord Stream has been blown up. Next, we have Iran. I covered the Iran nuclear deal as well in Vienna, and that didn't pan out. There's no nuclear deal as of now. It's still, Iran is still under sanctions. So no Iranian gas, no Iranian oil is allowed. And so suddenly we have the Israelis going and saying that now they will become Europe's largest gas partner. Well, lo and behold, who has a lot of gas? Gaza, of course. We just saw also with Lebanon how they were, Hezbollah told the Israelis that if they go to the Karish gas fields, they'll fire on them. And only then did the Americans find a diplomatic settlement. So, Syria has a lot of gas, can't extract it. Lebanon has a lot of gas, but can't extract it because of the port issue. And Gaza has a lot of gas, but of course it's under siege. And so what the Israelis have done with the Americans is they've kicked the Iranians, the Russians, and Syria, Lebanon, Palestine out of the game. And now they have control over the gas resources and the way to get them, of course, to Europe. So, this is a geostrategic project that's been in the works for a long, long time. And now having the Americans come in under the guise of, oh, we're going to help you build, some aid bridge. I mean, come on, this is so perfect. I was actually wondering just how they're going to address this story up. But make no mistake, that this is what they have in the plan for us.
Now, I can see, Richard, you have reported about Yemen. You have seen Iran and the negotiations. You have this kind of sense where you do analyze Syria, Palestine, Iraq, Lebanon, Yemen, and you make up this great interpretation of what is happening in terms of geopolitics. After you have described the American intent that is based on gas, and the American/Israeli, because we know that this is an American thing in the Middle East. It has always been. So what's going to happen in terms, because just like the fire alarm or the fire threat from Hezbollah ended something about Karish fields in Lebanon, there's a lot of fire in the Middle East. Iran has fire, Yemen has fire, Iraq has fire, Gaza still has fire even after 5 months of war. So where do you see this going? Is this going to play into a bigger, like many of the people are reading now, that this is going to be a bigger, harder, full-blown war? And others would see that this would play down because of geopolitical situations or elections or deals or so on. Where do you think this will go?
I think it's a high time that someone taught us a lesson in England, because we've been sticking our noses and fingers where they don't belong. Just today, the British and American navies have been hitting Yemen, for example. They hit the international airport 4 times today. I mean, these strikes every couple of days. It's so insulting to the Yemenis, who used to be a British colony, not a mandate or where it's dressed up, a straight up colony, like, unbelievable brutality. And then on top of the colonial days, we then starved them and bombed them with Saudi Arabia. And that's another thing I covered, how the UN was saying these ships can go to Yemen. They're cleared, and then the Saudi coalition would come in and just divert them so that there's no fuel reaching people in Yemen. And of course, when there's no fuel, everything goes to bits. So, after these 2 episodes, then again come a 3rd time now and bomb them is so insulting. I mean, it's kind of sad and funny at the same time, because the Yemeni drones cost a few $1,000s, and then the Royal Navy are using these million-pound missiles each, or the Americans using $2 million missiles each to shoot down Yemeni drones, which are far cheaper and far more effective. And it shows you who's really...
You think this is like a Cold War for the gas war underlying all that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just gas, but just to wrap up that thought, that on the military plane, the West is not winning anymore. you know, it's actually great that this is ineffective because they make a lot of money. But on the ground, like, who is winning? It's the resistance. When you look at the Cold War that's going on, you look at the resources. We have to remember that there's another thing at play here, which is the trade routes. You know, I mean, something that really, which I find upsetting and kind of frustrating, is the Arabs have all the trade routes in their hands, and they don't do anything. They have the Strait of Gibraltar. They have, of course, the Suez Canal. They have the Bab el-Mandeb Strait in Yemen, and then the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, you could just shut one of these, and I mean, look at Yemen have done that. Literally, you shut one of these and just cause a disaster for them. And yet that's not happening. Instead, what we're seeing is this alternative Silk Road that's being built, where you have you know, goods going from India to the UAE, and then into Saudi Arabia, and then to Jordan, and then you know, occupied Palestine and onwards. And you know, I know the Israelis have been kind of hyping up that it's functioning way more than it is, but this is in the cards. And we should always remember that before October 7th, one of the reasons for October 7th, Netanyahu went to the United Nations and he held up this map with Palestine completely taken off, and he drew the trade route. He spelled it out for everyone. And this was, you know, his way of saying, well, look, you know, if we're allowed to, we're just going to wipe Palestine off the map, and the Palestinian cause is gone. And by the way, we're going to make some money. We're going to make a lot of money with these friends of ours in Saudi Arabia and so on. And you really see the fruits of Donald Trump's Abraham Accords coming to life with that now. And so, you know, I find it very funny when people think that he would somehow be better for Palestinians, but that's another story. So, you know, there is absolutely a Cold War happening, but, you know, when you see what's happening right now today on the Lebanese front, where Hezbollah are firing 100, you know, rockets into the Golan Heights, I mean, you know, it's already a regional war. I don't know why it took CNN 5 months to even start talking about this term. You know, I don't know where their heads have been. It's already a regional war. It's always been a regional war. This is only a foreign concept for people who haven't been paying attention. You know, this is something that they don't understand. You can't talk about Palestine and then separate that from you know, what's happening in Syria and Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, and of course Iran's support. You know, this is one axis now, and it has been for quite a while. And you know, where the Arabs failed with the Pan-Arab movement, which is a shame. You know, in the days of Nasser, we've seen the axis of resistance kind of take the torch and run with it. But nevertheless, they are the ones that are you know, holding a Palestinian cause and holding true to it, whereas the Saudis are not.
Yeah. Richard, so you think it is a regional war by now, and this has been established, but how do you think this can play out in the end?
Well, it's not going to work for the West, because you have too many problems from the sanctions. I mean, if you look at the price of electricity, you look at the price of goods in the West, people are already on edge. And so this is not one thing. And then before that, they had COVID. So all these small businesses were destroyed. And now they have another, you know, a dilemma. They just don't know what's going on and how hard this is going to hit them. I know they want to make it sound like Yemen is going to destroy, you know, global trade or something. It's not like that. It's not going to make life. It's not because of Yemen that this is going to happen. If anyone is to blame, it's the arms contractors and the weapons companies. They have led things to this situation, you know, and led it to this standard.
I want to ask you something a little bit more personal and in person now, Richard. As a journalist and as someone who's always speaking very openly and unapologetically anti-Israel, pro-axis of resistance, how do you see that things have changed after this Gaza genocide? How do you feel like, because you are in the West, you have a British identity, half of you is British. So how is that side of the world looking at the axis of resistance? Do they still see them as terrorists, as these jihadis? Is there a better understanding of the colonial face of the actual war in the Middle East? How do you see things in the West today among like the people, the journalists, the activists, and so on?
I think there's better understanding in the left. When I say left, I mean like the proper left, not this kind of AOC stuff. But the problem is that there's a lot of ignorance. If people in England actually knew their history as they're supposed to, they would understand that you shouldn't be siding with Israel, because let me just put it simply like this. Hamas have never attacked any British targets. They've never done anything to the United Kingdom. The Israelis have. I mean, the Israelis tried to kill Winston Churchill during World War II. Again, I repeat that, during World War II. So while England are fighting the Nazis, the Israelis, the Zionists, thought it would be a good idea to kill Churchill, which makes a lot of sense. And then, of course, they planted bombs across London. They invented things like the letter bombs and used that en masse. They killed dozens of British citizens, soldiers, police, not just in Palestine, but all over the world. So they really went on a campaign of assassinations, of war against the UK. So if we're going to talk about terrorists, it's the Zionists. And if you look at the MI5 files from 1945, so Britain had just finished fighting the Nazis. What is the number one security threat in Britain? It's the Zionists, which really says a lot. It's not the Soviets, it's the Zionists. So I really want people in England and Europe to understand this, that since day one, Israelis have done nothing but kill British citizens, and then on top of that, of course, this is if you don't care about Palestinians. You should care about Palestinians number one. But even if you want to be selfish, the Israelis have done nothing but kill British citizens, and now on top of it, they take away free speech. You can't say what you want because they control the media, and they enact punishments on other people. And then, of course, they do the same thing to the Americans. So if you really actually care about your own country, whether it's the United Kingdom or the US, or you care about free speech, the last ones on earth that you would support are the Israelis.
I just want to ask you something. As a person who's, I'm sure you have this kind of experience. The generation that went to the UK in the 80s or in the 90s were less vocal. I'm talking about Palestinians, Lebanese, and Syrians. They used to be less vocal. I see people from your generation or Gen Z that are like British Lebanese or British Syrian or British Palestinian, very vocal and out on the streets. And we see now millions demonstrating for Palestine. Do you feel that the community in the UK or the activism has gained more stamina or more courage in this most recent days, or is it because this is actually a televised genocide, so nobody can stay like silent anymore?
Well, I can't speak to how that generation feel, but I know some elder people who come up to me or message me and say that thank you for saying these things. We couldn't say them back then, and so on. But yeah, I think it's the latter. It's the fact that this is a televised genocide. It's so. It really goes against everything human to look at this and just say nothing. You have to be heartless, like actually heartless, to see these things and just shrug it off. I mean, just today, I think, this is from the UN. They said more children in Gaza have been killed in the last 4 months than all the wars in the last 4 years around the world. I mean, how can you not care about that? So I think this is the number one factor. It enrages people to see this, and it should enrage them.
It is so bad that this has become so common that it is not what we are screaming about every minute of every day. And I know I personally struggle because you cannot live if you're always screaming, but you cannot actually live because there is a genocide. So now 5 months into that, and we see it has been normalized in a way in the media. And I tell you something, Richard, here in Lebanon, we are actually living a war,
Yeah.
but the Lebanese media is not talking about it. The Lebanese media made more drama about any other trivial problem that caused some conflict of interest. more than this war. You don't see it on the headlines. You don't see any song or anthem for it. While in the past, it was something different. So here's my question. The divisions inside, like the Saudi-Iranian conflict in the Middle East, the Sunni-Shia conflict, the inside the Yemen, and even in the Palestinian, the Syrian, the Lebanese, when we look at all these struggles and Iraq, there is no actual one nation in the Levant. There is no state that doesn't have these kinds of dilemmas, internal, political, and economical, and social, and sometimes security. So don't you see this as like too good to be true, and we see that these nations might actually win over a colonial, rich, mainstream media supported colonizing global force?
Yeah, I certainly know what you're saying. It's there's a lot of division, but I think that's exactly what you know, if you're sitting in London and you want to exploit any weaknesses in the Middle East, that's what you would go for, and that's what France and the UK did. Is they you know, they divide people based on sectarian lines, which is, I mean, the whole basis behind Sykes-Picot when they carved up Syria. It's like, oh, let's have a Christian country here. We'll have, you know, a little carved up section over here for from Syria. Let's give it to Turkey, and you know, and then Iraq can be like, you know, a split between Sunnis and Shias and kind of a mix. That's exactly what you want to go for, because it makes it very difficult then to you know, you have like a wall between you and your neighbors, and you're stuck with different people. And then Israel, of course, itself is the biggest example of British and French colonial ingenuities. You stick a bunch of Europeans in the middle. So I know it's kind of disheartening to look at all of this stuff. But if you look at the resistance today compared to 30 years ago, or let me just say 2006, for example. I mean, even in 2006 was incredible. You know, how Hezbollah crushed the Israelis. I mean, they haven't recovered till today. Honestly, the only reason they've started bombing Lebanon again is because of this October 7th thing. Until then, they refused to even you know, drop a bomb on Lebanon. So, you know, if you look at the capabilities that Hamas have, that Hezbollah have, compared to 30 years ago, 40 years ago, it's insane. And on the flip side, what's happening with the Israelis? The Israelis are struggling to find people to be sent to the front lines. You know, they just don't have this drive to fight like the Arabs do, because, you know, when you're someone who's born in Lebanon, you know, okay, this is my country, this is my land, I come from here. How is some guy from Ukraine going to come here and tell me that, you know, this is not my land? They just don't have this drive. And you know, many of them are running away from the front, leaving the country. And if you look at Britain, you look at the United States, you know, just the UK, I can tell you, is not what it used to be before. You know, it's really just a lapdog for the US. And the United States, you know, are also, this is the biggest anti-war movement, I would say, since Iraq or Vietnam. So there's a lot of opposition, and they're banning TikTok today to keep people ignorant. So I don't look at the UK and the US and the West as being, you know, like this hegemon that is united and so on. They want it to look that way, but it's just not. And once again, if you look at the reality on the battlefield, who is winning? It's the axis of resistance.
Richard, let's talk more personal also. There's something like I salute you. Kudos to your courage. Sometimes many of the people that choose to be on the side of the oppressor, or the side of the West, or the side of the popular narrative, it's because it's more comfortable over there. It's more applauded over there. You got more benefits out of it. And because people think they're gonna be maimed or like shamed or fought or even oppressed or harmed, or they're not gonna make money. So this is the main reason why I think some journalists or some activists or some politicians also choose to stay on the side of the colonizer, because I cannot think of any human enjoying to be disrespected and colonized. It's only like fear. So I really think that when we actually tell people the stories about activists and politicians who could make it, who said their word, fought their fights, and kept their heads in big challenges. This is why I'm telling you I salute you, because I know that you have been a very courageous voice for a long time now. You've spoken in the unpopular sense since the Syrian war broke out, and also about Palestine and about all these divisive issues. So I would like to listen to your story personally as a journalist, and for our listeners and viewers later on. Let us see that we can be that free and that angry, even if we're living in the UK or in Europe. So can you tell us why and how can you actually vocally go out and say the 4-letter F word, Israel, like 10 times consecutively in a video, and you own your ground and you don't care about the backlash? I don't think I have ever seen anything more courageous. I'm not like, I don't want everyone to go out and say that. I know we are journalists, we have better ways to articulate, but sometimes, you know, you get sick of things, and that is just a moment of honesty and someone who really doesn't care. Tell us where and why can we actually succeed. I want others who are listening to be more empowered to work on their own and to say whatever they want to say. So how could you do it? And were you like threatened? Is it tough for you? Can we listen to your story on that?
Well, you're very kind. And the thing is that, look, very, very simply, it's I can't look at this and not be angry. You know, it just, since the Iraq War, that was really when I was growing up, and I saw the, you know, George Bush and Tony Blair on television lying, and Donald Rumsfeld. This was very formative for me, because you know, it's like the whole world knew they were lying. And then Colin Powell at the United Nations was really like the cherry on top. The whole world knew they were lying. And then they went in and they killed all these people. And it's like, even just 3 years ago, I think the BBC made a documentary about this, and I was so confused, because it was a good documentary for the most part, and then I was thinking to myself, wait, weren't you lying about the war? So, you know, you have these media outlets who help the government push these wars, and then they'll come back a few years later and say, you know, oops. And the New York Times, of course, did the same thing. So when I see that, I want to be as far away, you know, from that as possible. And I don't want to be anything like that. And of course, it's just a question of, you know, of empathy. I can't look at these images and then, you know, be okay with that. And the same thing with, you know, with Julian Assange. I mean, I'm every single time there's a court hearing, I swear to God, I often, you know, I just get stunned. I'm like looking around the room and I'm like, is this happening? Yeah, it's actually happening. I'm here. They are saying these things, and this is going forward. You know, like, you know, this guy's in prison because he exposed these war crimes, right? So he did the exact same thing. Everything we're seeing right now that's happening in Palestine, it already happened in Iraq, it happened in Afghanistan, and he's the one who put it out there, and that's why he's in prison. And it's just, I'm so disgusted that this is allowed to proceed in a courtroom. And, you know, we then go around and tell the world that, you know, we care about open justice, and we're, you know, we're the best in human rights and democracy and all these things, and we have a free press. So, you know, like I said, it's discussed at the mainstream media. It's discussed at what the government is doing, and you know, it's the job of the press to protest the government. I mean, you know, if I went along with everything the government would say, there'd be something very, very deeply wrong with me. So it's not you don't oppose them just for the sake of opposing them, but you know, that's a telltale sign, and that's why the press can't be trusted, because they're always in favor of what the government are doing, and even when they aren't, they'll always have you know, they'll basically say, well, you know, we don't like how Israel is butchering Palestinians, but of course Israel has the right to exist. And it's like, you know, they leave out what Israel's doing in the West Bank and in Syria and in Lebanon. So, you know, they have a lot of telltale signs, and I don't want to be anything like that.
So it's basically like there are two ways to talk to the different or to talk to the other. There's one way trying to convince them or to win them over, and there's the other way where you're fed up with trying to convince them, and you just say whatever.
Well, I do both.
So
yeah, I do both.
So this is here's where my question. We can have these stances towards governments, towards like I don't know, televisions or networks. But can we really have it towards the people? My problem, my struggle personally is not with, for example, Samir Jaja. My struggle is with the good people in my country, in my community, and my friends that really think like that. And they are good people. And in the end, how do you
Yes.
convince the people? Because this comes from fear. I know, Richard, that being who you are, being raised to a Syrian mom, I'm very proud that you are half Syrian, because I consider myself part of this Levantine Greater Syria,
Yes.
pre-colonization, you know? So
Yeah,
you
exactly.
you are a half brother in a sense. So so we're very proud of your Syrian ancestry, but I'm sure that this has taught you also that part of
Yeah.
the struggle, you know?
Without
So
question. You know, of course, it makes me very happy to hear that you think the Qawmi way, you know, uh, uh, as you said, the Syrian way before it was carved up by France and England. And yeah,
well, it's people who know history cannot regard
exactly.
it as, I mean, Daesh, ISIS came and regarded it in one entity.
Yeah,
Israel, the colonizing force, regardless, they don't speak the same way
right.
about the Gulf or Egypt or Turkey or even Iran. They tell
Yeah,
us all the time they want Beirut and they want Damascus and they want the Jordan
yeah.
River and they want Palestine. This is what they want, basically.
Yeah, but it's incredible, right? Like, you know, they can speak like this and there's nothing wrong with it, but you know,
But we can't.
yeah, but we can't. And absolutely, my mother had also a lot of influence on my thinking. I mean, as did my father, because they both know history. But you know, yeah, my mother's background definitely. I mean, she took me, for example, to Ugarit, which is in the north of Syria near the
Ogarit.
coast.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
In
you know.
Latakia.
There you go. Exactly. So you know, for me, I really love history. I really appreciate how far back history goes in Syria and in the Levant. I mean, it's truly fascinating. And when you think about it, that this is the crossroads between Asia and Europe and Africa, it's no wonder that everyone keeps trying to colonize it and carve it up.
Of course.
But that doesn't justify it, of course. It just shows you that it's sort of a crown jewel of geography and politics. But yeah, they definitely had a lot of influence on my thinking, and after all, it's just anti-colonial, so it all fits together.
Well, the question that I was wanting to ask before we paraded how great it is that you are from Syria. The question was, being from here, you know that it is very hard to deal with the drastic differences that can actually result into civil wars and have actually
Yeah.
resulted in civil wars. So this is a very big problem for us in Lebanon. I want to see maybe some Generation Z, maybe some English language user from like a diaspora is listening to us. I want you to speak to a good person who believes that both me and you are full of S for double word, and that they prefer the Israelis to Hamas or Palestinians or Islam, and they don't want to live with them, and they prefer America and Hollywood, and this is the freedom, and we are both Malali from Iran, etc. So these people who think we are nothing, if they're listening to you, what is your reason?
Okay. Well,
How do you bring them back?
let me try and convince them. Yeah, I'm a British journalist, and the only government that I'm afraid of putting me in prison is my own. It's not another country's, or Iran, or what, or you know, Hamas or whatever. So I think that says a lot. You know, because I know Julian Assange is in jail right now. I've dealt with this case.
But they will tell you right away that this is your problem because you're living there. Here, their problem is
No,
people who are wanting to
I'm
change their life.
the West promises a free press, so that's a free press. It
Okay.
doesn't mean anything else. That means without constraint, and you know, that's it. And also the censorship. I can tell you that, you know, the only place that I've ever been censored, and when I say censorship, that means either reports or being taken down, or, for example, your money being taken away, so you can't do it further reports, which is the same thing. It's of course in the West again, like, you know, YouTube is an American corporation, so you know the regime of censorship against journalists is the most ferocious and the most angry in the West. So all this liberty and this, like, whatever they imagine America and Britain to be, it's just complete utter rubbish. Yes, it's good to a certain degree, but it's not better than a different or other systems. As a matter of fact, I think it's really worse, because in the end, it's like, you can only be allowed to work at a major corporation or a major news outlet if you are corrupt. What does that do except promote more corruption? So, I really want people to understand that, the Western system is not the best system, and it's actually really, really corrupt and bad. It doesn't foster good journalism, and it's quite to the contrary, actually. It just fosters wars. And the proof is in the dead bodies that have piled up across the Middle East.
Well, Richard, we are like, the time just flew, and I have one more great chapter to discuss with you, and this is journalism and free journalism and the freedom of the press, and what you have been doing for almost a decade. And I want to ask you, do you think, after you have spoken about your government and the governments and the West in general, like, we are living something new? No, they do not control the narrative. No, they do not control the information and the flood of information. And yes, there is free journalism on YouTube, on TikTok, on every single platform. There's you. We see these hundreds of people who have like a voice now. So based on your experience, how do you see the freedom of these social media platforms really liberating on a larger global scale? Because it's actually making them lose control of the narrative. I mean, how big can it be, and how big has it changed based on your experience? Tell us a little bit about your platforms, for example, and your reach.
Yeah, I mean, it's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, as you pointed out, it allowed this culture of non-corporate journalism to be birthed and then grow. But on the other hand, it's like they caught up to it. They created these scandals. They said, well, on YouTube they're promoting this and that content, and so we can't have that. And then what happened is these corporations like ABC, like CNN, they made it so that when you're watching YouTube and you're watching this channel or my channel, afterwards it will recommend corporate media. So like the algorithm brings you back to their nonsense once again. And then in addition to that, they're of course censoring, deplatforming, demonetizing many people. I mean, my YouTube channel was demonetized, I think, 3 months ago after October 7th. So they basically deleted hours of my coverage. I don't even know why, which is really great. And YouTube, I mean, I just hit on YouTube, I think, over my channel is like 4 years old that I've been doing journalism on it, and it's got 200,000 subscribers, but it's demonetized because because I said something bad about Israel or whatever. And it's just whatever. I mean, it comes with the territory, but
now some people would argue that these kinds of bans and shadow bans and demonetizing, they're just like they just show how powerful we've become, or you've become, or these platforms have become, that they actually need to censor them. I'm talking about the power. Maybe they can demonetize you. I'm talking about the power to actually change. Because yes, they might tell you about the mainstream media after your video directly, but the generation, like maybe our fathers used to really buy that, or like, but there is a new generation that doesn't watch TV, and
I hate it.
and it's, I mean, we can see it in the universities. So so based on that, do you think, like, even if they demonetize, do you think they can, in the end, they can actually tame it, or it can actually start a revolution globally? Like,
no,
is it this or that?
I don't think they can tame it, because I mean, the problem with demonetization is just that it's like when you take away a journalist's money, you're basically ensuring they can't work and therefore do journalism. But that's not just the point here. It's also they don't recommend the videos also, and so on. But still, I don't know. I know that what we're doing is the right way forward. It's the only way forward. There is no half measure here or quarter measure. It has to be this way. And once again, I'm as journalists, we're just interested in what's factual. What Israel say these are fantasies. You know, what the FCO and the State Department say, they're fantasies. And I cannot, you know, with a straight face go in front of a camera and just lie to people and repeat this garbage. What's the point? They can just go and turn on BBC and watch the same thing.
We have a few minutes left, Richard. I want to ask you something. Because I've been told that they are actually following all kinds of media, so you never know. If this video gets to the leader of Hezbollah or the leader of Hamas, and they hear this British journalist who has been in the courtroom when Assange was there, and there's a message he's saying, I don't know. I think you are more pro-resistance than me. So what's your message to the leaders of the military resistance, whether it's in Yemen, Lebanon, Nasrallah, or like Hamas, Abu Ubaidah? What do you tell them? What do you like send them now? Message
I
from a
would say
British
تحية
journalist, that is
المقاومة.
you.
I would say تحية المقاومة, long live the resistance, and thank you for actually standing up for people's human rights and doing what the Arab states, with the exception of Syria, failed to do in the Levant, and then taking up the fight. You know, there are so many more people than the media let on who actually support the blockade that Yemen has put forward, and support the Palestinian resistance and the Lebanese resistance. And these are, as you know, these are resistances that are grounded in international law. They are legal under the Geneva Convention, and not only legally justifiable, but morally and necessary in order to ensure the survivability of the Arab people.
Richard, there's like, and then someone would ask you, well, تحيا المقاومة from over there, and you have the freedom to say these words. So how? Since you say you don't have the freedom as a journalist, you're saying some things that people say, people are afraid to say in the UK. How are you safe saying تحيا المقاومة?
I don't know. I guess you have to ask God maybe. But you know, I just believe that if I don't say it, I mean, who else is going to say it? This is just me being honest with you. You know, resistance is something that should be glorified. We glorify the French resistance from World War II. Why shouldn't we glorify the Lebanese resistance today? It is the quintessential example of fighting against evil.
Do you really get gigs? Do you really get gigs to work in any organization after you say these words?
Well, I don't care. I'm independent, so.
So it's only people who really don't care that can say these words now around the world. But we are seeing them more and more on platforms, you know? So more people care less about what the punishment is. In general, Richard, this has been your voice for years, and now it is your voice. I have one more question before we end this discussion. After all these wars and all these times, what kind of respite do you think we can promise the people in Gaza? I mean, for me personally, this is not the first or the second or the fifth war I have witnessed, and I'm 35 years old now. So I'm thinking there are kids that are like bred in wars, and we tell them like the resistance will win and we will win and the West will lose, but this can take the course of lifetimes.
Yeah.
Do you have any words of hope that we can tell them?
You know, it's difficult because you have tens of, if it's not already tens of thousands of children now who are orphaned. You know, there's this term that they've coined now also about wounded child, no surviving family. It's difficult. I can't possibly console someone who is in that situation because, you know, I haven't experienced anything even close to that. You know, but I will say that you know, seeing Syria being destroyed like that, and you know, not having contact with family. So I mean, I haven't been to Syria since the war began. So you know, this also affected me personally, not on the same level, of course, but you know, we have children all over the Middle East littered with these painful experiences, and it's always the same actors. I don't know what respite I can offer them, but I do believe this, that you know, the sum of all their pain is going to come back tenfold in terms of graces for the Arab people. You know, this is unfortunately a revolutionary war that we're fighting right now. People need to understand it that way. It's a occupied, colonized people, the Arab people, kicking the colonizer after hundreds of years. And so, you know, for me, what I can hope is that these children are the ones who will be carrying the flag over the hills when that happens, because they are the ones who sacrifice more than anyone else and who can speak about this more than anyone else. And, you know, what's so disgusting is that people in the White House and in Number 10, they want to talk about, you know, humanitarian pauses. They will never meet one of these children or bring them to Downing Street and do their cheap photo ops with them, or even give them one moment of their time. So, you know, honestly, they should be, when I say this, I really mean this. People like Rishi Sunak and Joe Biden, they need to be taken to The Hague. We need to have a Nuremberg 2.0 for every single, not just child, every family that they murdered. We all know what happened to the Nazis at the end of World War II. And they were given the only punishment that you could give them. And that's what needs to happen to these people. Rishi Sunak, Netanyahu, Joe Biden are no better. They are even worse than these Nazi leaders.
Well, the past 5 months, but little changed, and little did they care about what we are saying. The governments go on, but let me tell you personally,
I think they do care. I think they do care, and that's why they're trying to ban TikTok, and they're trying to censor and deplatform people. I assure you that they care. I can guarantee you this.
I want to tell you one thing, just to put it out there, Richard. I felt more free to walk in my kufiyya in London than I did in many parts of Beirut in the
Yeah, I can
past 5
understand why.
months.
Of course, it's complicated.
So I think the idea of freedom and how we view it, I only was able to scream, Netanyahu, shame on you, or it's a genocide. I only was able to do that in the UK. We couldn't do this in Lebanon. We cannot do this in any Arab country. People in Jordan are being punished for that. People in Egypt are being punished for that.
It's because of Western influence. It's because the MI6 and CIA have so much influence in these countries since 100 years.
No, I'm not trying to say that there is no colonization and the problem is not colonization. I'm just saying that when it comes to the freedom to express the anger for Palestine, I personally was able to practice that solely in the United Kingdom.
Okay,
so,
but your
I had to put
photographs,
it out there.
there are photographs of every single person attending, and Big Brother is watching. We should always remember that. So we pay a price even when we think we're free. There, you know, there's some unnamed government official like slowly noting down your name and my name and taking photographs. It's very authoritarian in England.
But
do
you think this was the same in Germany?
Yeah, I mean, would you mean now or 70 years ago?
No, I mean today. I mean the idea of free demonstrations in the UK.
Well, Germany, no, Germany's more Nazi still.
Okay, and even France, and even so, if I want to look and even I don't know, I can see if I want to look. I'm a colonized person here, talking to a British person. I'm not trying to tell you how beautiful it is to be colonized, but I think we have to take into consideration from George Galloway's Rochdale to the idea of Ghassan Abu Sitta coming from the UK in general, to Hussam Zumlut screaming in the middle of the street, to Father Mundir Ishaq doing all that. I mean, in a sense, we have to give it out there to the institutions, to the universities, to the communities that are empowering these voices. But this is happening in the UK, and it's not happening anywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, it's true, but I feel like it's because they don't have a choice. They really just they didn't predict
it's the force of the people.
Yeah,
it's
really,
the force of the people.
They're not equipped to deal with this. They didn't predict this happening. They thought this is going to be another one of those things where they just, you know, bomb the Middle East and they just get away with it. You know, we should remember these are the biggest protests since the Iraq War, and that was, you know, when 2003. It's 20 years ago.
Well, our thoughts and our prayers are with every courageous voice out there, whether it's in Europe and UK, and of course here in the land of the genocide in Palestine, in war-torn Syria, in impoverished Lebanon, in Iraq. I mean, everywhere we look, there has been a
Yeah,
disaster and calamity, and everywhere we look,
it's
it
really
has
horrible.
one reason, and it is the colonization. So we pray for you as well, Richard, for you. And I can only think of all these activists and vocal journalists and rappers and poets that are speaking up with a very eloquent and good language all around the world. I think we see you and we appreciate what you're trying to do. You have sometimes louder voices than us. And thank you for joining us and for giving us the time to converse. And
Thank
I
you.
hope to listen to another conversation on the same platform with you in Arabic, because you speak 4 languages. Maybe we can do
Yeah.
2 for المباشر. And
يلا
then
ليش لا.
يلا تاني مرة بالعربي مع إياد لكن.
إن شاء الله. Okay.
Okay, Richard Meders, thank you for your time. Make sure to follow him
Thank
on
you.
Twitter for more revolution all the time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.